Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of What I Want to Show You. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes sharing what we want to show you at the intersection of ideas and experiences. We realize that despite our very different backgrounds, locations, and experiences, we have a lot of commonalities that we didn't expect. So we thought that you might have some as well, and we'd like to share ours with you. Today, we'd like to talk about self-care and privilege. It's often something we don't think about, but a lot of self-care is really not something that we can all talk about. So I'm here with
Char. It's so good to be here with you this morning, Laura. Well, I guess it's morning for me, but afternoon for you.
It's great to talk to you again, Char. So I was thinking about self-care and privilege, especially since it's really, really chilly in Cape Town today. It has been for the past few days. And I read this lovely meme that said, take an extra hour in bed if it's cold this morning, take a nap after lunchtime, spend the day watching series if that's what you need to do. And that sounds lovely. I really appreciate the sentiment. I do. But I can't do that in the week. And I think that the level of privilege that would allow us to just spend our days doing whatever we feel we need to do is a level of privilege that some of us can only dream of. It's not something that, some of us aspire to it, but it's not really a reality for a lot of people. So I was wondering what you think about these kinds of bits of advice.
I do think everybody dreams about the point in life where you can lay around in bed and get up when you feel like it and sit on the couch and watch a good show or two or four and read a good book and take a nap and kind of set your own schedule. And people ask me, I recently retired and then started working for myself, and everybody's like, oh, are you just enjoying the fact that you can just lay around all day and do these things? Because I think that's what they associate with retirement, that when you reach the point where you can retire, that's what your life is going to be. And I can't do that. I still have financial obligations to my family, and so I'm continuing working. And I think that ideal that is put out there, at least in my culture, that, well, you work hard enough and eventually you'll get to retire. And when that happens for you, then you'll be able to lounge around all day and watch shows and eat food. But until then, until you reach that magical retirement, that isn't really a reality for most people.
Even after retirement, it's not a reality for most people. There are just the demands of everyday life. Whether you would want to lounge around for the next 15, 20 years is a different topic entirely.
Right.
But I look at my father-in-law, he's retired, but he still has home maintenance that he does. He's retired. But he still has home maintenance. He still has he does his woodworking, which helps to pay the bills, because he does still have bills. He doesn't have financial obligations to his family anymore, but he still has himself to take care of.
Right. He has financial obligations to himself. And I think mental obligations too. When you see those memes, I think they're really people who are saying, my brain needs a break, or my physical body needs a break, that it can't endure working. The mental stress of working. And for many people, it's the physical stress of working. And, the conversations about not just retirement, but vacation days and sick leave. And are you able to take a day off of work when you're not feeling well? That is a privilege thing. Here in the United States, there are many people that don't have that safety net of sick leave or personal leave time, that if you miss a day of work, then you're not getting paid for that day. And potentially you may lose your job if you miss days of work. And for people who are working at an hourly pay level in a lot of service industry, or working for delivery companies, or where you really, there's no one else that can do your job. So if you're not showing up to do your job, they'll find somebody to do your job. Like, that's a whole level of self-care and privilege that I think sometimes we take for granted, because in my world, that wasn't something I ever had to deal with.
So for me, when I was younger, when I was studying still as a student, I did have that situation where no work meant no pay, where you don't have sick leave, where you're a casual worker, so they can get around. So we have the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, but they get around that by casual work. I don't know if it's called the same thing where you are, but that means you get paid an hourly rate. You don't come in, you don't get paid, and you can take maybe one day every 6 months, which is not what the law says you need to have. But beyond that, they'll just tell you not to come back, because they don't, even though they're not going to pay you, they want somebody who will always come into work. And the fact is that some of us are blessed with better health than others, but nobody can actually sustain that. And we need a mental and emotional and physical break sometimes, but you only get a certain amount, and then you have that day where I'm not technically sick, but I'm feeling a little tired, under the weather. Maybe I didn't sleep last night, and I have to just push through it. And I think that most people do. Even now that I work in a job where I do get sick leave, and I do get a few days of mental health leave even, which is not by any means something that is true across the board for everyone. Even in my privileged position, that's true. And even in my privileged position, I can't decide on a Tuesday afternoon that I need some self-care and go take a bubble bath.
Right. That's just not, you can't walk out of the workspace. Like, I'm going to take a 3-hour lunch today because I need to go home and ride my bike and just clear my brain so that I can come back here and be more efficient. Although that is the truth, that's really not something that is accepted. You can't do that when you have a set work schedule and set time that you can be out. It's a little bit better if you're a contract employee and not an hourly employee. You do have a little bit more flexibility, but that's still flexibility within some set boundaries.
And even if you have that kind of flexibility, you need to be, it's just the reality that you need to be contactable for your colleagues during work time at least, or what is commonly understood to be work time. So, between say 8 and 5 or whatever your hours are, you need to be available. And so while I'm fine if I have an emergency, or if my cat is needs to go to the vet urgently, or I need to go to the doctor urgently, or there's something that can't wait, sure. But if it's something as trivial as my mental health, and I'm saying that ironically,
right?
I don't
trivial
feel I can
with
do
air
it.
quotes around it.
Yes, absolutely. I just don't feel that I can take that time. And it's not a fault of my employer. It's just the way that business works. It's just the way that life works. And I would love a society where we don't need money and we don't have money, and everybody's basic needs are taken care of. And if we take a look at the needs hierarchy, we can all focus on the things higher up, but that's just not the reality we have right now. So these people who share these self-care strategies, I think it comes from a good place, but it's just not taking into the account the reality that most of us live in.
Well, and it is a disconnect, because I think when you look at TV shows or social media posting of people who are, at least what they're portraying is they are living that lifestyle. where my biggest decision today was which purse to select out of my closet, or which restaurant to meet my friends at, or which glamorous destination I'm going to go to next. I think in our cultures, those are held up as like, see, this is possible. You can aspire to this, and let's watch these people who actually are living that. And I suspect that running in the background, those individuals still have that same need for time away, or to not be on all the time. Or so what they're saying, the public view is, see, this is obtainable and possible. Yet I really wonder on the backside if they're not just like everyone else, that there's expectations for them as well, that their life to be fulfilling cannot just be leisure all the time, that leisure itself is work and stressful for them. Because I think you feel badly then. It's like, well, how come I can't get to that? I work really hard. I work all these hours. I don't take days off. I don't take my sick leave time. I don't do those things because it's important that I'm there and doing my job for all these reasons. But someday I'll be at the point where I can do this. Like, I think we've sent false messages to everyone. And instead the message should be, what does self-care look like for you, so that you can be the most effective and efficient and successful and happy person that you can be in your life. And because you're doing those things, then you are going to be a effective coworker, or an effective employee, or a supportive friend, or supportive spouse or colleague, because you've found in your individual ways that you can process and take care of yourself within the space that you have, rather than trying to meet some unrealistic or unobtainable expectation that you see in the movies or on TV or in a magazine, what you think it should be for yourself.
Exactly. So I can't maybe do all of those things, but what I can do is go for a walk in my lunch break. That's what I can do. That's something obtainable. That's something that I can actually do. I can, after I knock off, I can spend half an hour reading a book. I can cook dinner with my family. So I think that we need to, it feels like thinking smaller, but it's actually probably healthier in a way. These unobtainable goals are never going to be useful for those of us for whom they're unobtainable. And I don't necessarily know if they should be goals, because I don't think that sitting on, as much as I would like to sit on the couch when it's raining outside and watch series all day, I don't actually think that's going to be long-term value. It's not going to bring long-term value to my mental health or to my physical health even.
Well, I had a chance to hear Sean Aker speak a few weeks ago at a conference, and all of his research is around happiness. And one of the things that I think is relevant that he shared to our conversation is that the myth of, if I only can do this and this, then I will be happy. If only these three things will happen, then I will be happy. If I only can obtain these objects, then I'll be happy. And what ultimately happens is that your brain just keeps resetting the bar. And so you never reach that like happy obtainment. It just keeps getting pushed out. And so you feel more stressed and not happy, instead of kind of what you were saying, Laura, that you have to be in the moment and say, all right, what is it around me right now that I can draw some positive energy from? Or where is that mindful minute that I can stop thinking about just for a minute, all these other things, and just focus on the positive things around me, or the beautiful things around me, or that I'm having this 15-minute quick chat with a friend and not worrying about what I need to do at the end of this 15 minutes. That like, if you keep postponing the thing that will make you happy and not actually finding happiness where you are right now, you're never going to be happy. It was a very like thought-provoking presentation.
And if that's that, yes, because if I keep thinking that that's what I need to be able to do, I need to be able to not work in the week, then I'm not going to be able to take care of myself now. And I don't know if I'm ever going to get to that point where I will, or where I will want to spend my days doing those kinds of things. I mean, once in a while, sure, but I'm after 2 weeks of leave, I'm ready to get back, and I enjoy doing that kind of thing in my leave, but I'm not going to ever be somebody who spends all my time lazing around. So I need to find little bits of things just to make sure that I don't burn myself out, little bits here and there. And these things can bring me joy, and they can be self-care, and they can preserve my physical and mental health.
I think, going back to the privilege conversation that you and I have had, even though we've lived in very different places growing up, I grew up in a middle-class family in America. And I had the opportunity to take vacations, and we had a camper, and we could go to a movie, and my family liked to play games and spend time together. Because my father was a teacher and my mother was a teacher, they had that flexibility in their schedule that we could spend large amounts of time together in the summer. And growing up, you didn't realize what a privilege that was until you started sharing experiences with other people when you got to college, what their experiences were like, which was still a privileged experience. The fact that they were in a college environment with you is still very different. But I also look at, as an educator and as an administrator, how we often overlook the life and lived experiences of families because of our own biases, of our own experiences growing up. When we schedule meetings with parents, maybe before school or right after school, with the expectation that the parent will be able to adjust their life to fit into our schedule at a time that's convenient for us, but without taking into consideration, because as employees of a school district, we do have sick days and we do have personal leave days and we do have a little flexibility in our schedule. We don't take into consideration the fact that for those parents, maybe they are in that position where they have limited sick days. They have limited time away from their work. And in order for them to come to be a part of this conference about their child, which they value, the trade-off is going to be they're going to have to use some of that limited time that would have been time that they may have been doing self-care. They may have been focusing on their family. They may have needed that to take care of their own needs. And it's selfish of us to say, well, if you can't make that time, then maybe, you need to reevaluate your priorities for your kids. And it's like, okay, well, that's the wrong mindset. Maybe it's, hey, we're partnering with you to support your child. What's going to work for you? Can you come in person? Is there a time that's going to work for you to come in person? Could we do a Zoom call? Could we do a phone call? Is there a place that would be more convenient that would help you in your schedule rather than having you come to our space? Like, is there a way that we could come to your space, or that could be something different? Because I do think through our privilege that we miss the fact that there are people who don't have that same flexibility, who have limited time or no time. And that because we're asking for part of that time, we're asking them to give up something that we would value. That if somebody asked us to give up some of our own personal time or leave time, would we do that? Or would we say, can you do that differently? That doesn't work for my time. I need you to come in and adjust. So I think that's a blind spot for us often.
We make these demands on other people that we would never accept for ourselves. I also, I'm remembered when I was working in tertiary education, they were switching to online assignments. So you had to submit online. And we had some correspondence, mostly correspondence students. And there was a student who explained to her lecturer that she had to make a choice. Her mother was ill and couldn't be alone, but she would have to travel then, and she would have to pay somebody to look after her mother so that she could travel to an internet cafe. And so she said to her, my choice, these are my choices. Either I can drop it in a box, a post box down the road from my house and eat, or I can do what the university demands right now and not eat for the next 2 days. And my ill mother doesn't get to eat either. And these are the kinds of, and then you want somebody like that who's just scraping by to survive. We make these demands on people, and then somebody like that burns out, and we say, oh, well, you should have practiced self-care. Oh, but you should have taken care of your mental health. But when you're just scraping by to survive, you really can't do that. You really can't. So even we were talking about smaller notions of self-care, but I think that actually just putting out these unattainable things, they could actually be damaging, not to maybe somebody like you and me, but to somebody who feels they can't even do the simple things. Like they can't necessarily take a walk, or they don't necessarily have a safe place to walk.
Right.
You know, for somebody like that, it's hopeless.
Well, and I think you see then that hopelessness, and then that becomes a spiral. In the US, the mental health crisis is significant. And when you visit larger cities, the people who do not have access to safe housing, consistent meals, and then you layer the mental health piece on top of it. And then to turn around and say, okay, well, what does self-care look like there? When your entire day is spent on making sure that you make it to the next day. Like, where am I going to sleep tonight? Where am I going to eat? I have possessions. What do I do with my possessions? Especially if you're a woman, if you're a woman who does not have consistent, safe housing, like, what does that look like for you when your entire energy is focused on keeping yourself safe and fed? And how can you possibly then start thinking about, well, I really need to get myself a job, and I really would like better housing, but how do I even start? And the organizations, the nonprofits that are working to meet those base needs so that someone would have the space to start thinking about themselves in a like beyond tomorrow model. Like, okay, I now have a place where an employer could send interview information for me, or I have new clothing that I can wear for an interview, or I have a job where I can show up every day to that job and not be on-demand labor, where I'm just hoping that somebody will employ me for the day to do something so I can make enough money. I mean, our global society needs to be better at this, because I think it's going to continue to expand. The economic gaps are increasing, the education gaps are increasing, the climate shifts are happening, and we're going to see more and more people who are going to be in crisis or in trauma mode all the time. And from a mental health perspective, like, that's not sustainable. You can't live in crisis and trauma mode all the time and have an extended lifespan or feel like you have purpose and value. And I think that this is a real challenge, and I'm not sure how we address that challenge. I mean, education can help, but I think we're going to see more and more of this. The stories are intensifying in the United States of increasing communities where people are finding permanent campsites because they can't afford housing. And like when we talk about self-care and privilege, the fact that we have homes and jobs and can have like that care around us in itself is a privilege that it's not easy to recognize or talk about. It's a lot easier to just look beyond than to take advantage of how might we be helping them and what small thing can we do that might help with that.
And the hard thing is, I think, is that kind of focus also puts us at risk of compassion fatigue, in which case we're no use to anybody. So that is also, I think, but you also, when it stops bothering you, when it stops keeping you up at night, when it stops affecting you, that's when you know you have a real problem. So how do you find that balance? How do you find that balance where caring for yourself and caring for others, it's really, really difficult, because in order to care for yourself, you can't care for others all the time. But in order to care for yourself, you also need to do what you can.
I think it's that like full cup model that is very common right now. Fill your cup first, put your oxygen mask on before everybody else when you're on the plane, fill your own cup so that when you need to pour into someone else's, you have something to pour and it's not empty for yourself. And I think that's it. I think it's what you said, finding that balance between keeping yourself in a place where when the opportunities are presented to you where you can have an impact on others, that you have the capacity to make that impact, where you're not so exhausted yourself that you can't help come up with an innovative idea, or you can't volunteer time and hours, or you can't be a good listener for a friend who needs that. Or like if you've extended yourself so far out that your cup not only is empty, but you can't find it anymore, you've lost it altogether, then you're no use to anybody else either. So I agree with you that it's finding that balance for yourself, helping your colleagues fill their own cups. And going back in education, there's such a push right now on the importance of teaching life skills and giving kids space in their classrooms for that self-care time and to fill their own cups and find value in themselves and their work. And then there are people who are saying that is not a good investment of time. The 3 hours is what you should be focusing on, and go and class, and you need to spend more time in class, and they need to have more homework, and it's like, okay, people, if we really want them to be successful individuals, they need to also then have time to learn that mindfulness and self-care is important. And how do you do that at a small level? And start off your life that way so that by the time you get to be 50 or 60, you still are contributing and have capacity to have compassion and help others. I don't know. I think we're having a very deep conversation today about this, but I think it's bothersome to me when people criticize classrooms where teachers are taking the time to build relationships with students and to give them space to build relationships with each other and to identify and name emotions when they're feeling maxed out or when they just don't have the capacity to do something else, and teaching them those skills. How do you work collaboratively with someone else? How do you identify a problem and come up with solutions? How do you recognize when you just need to step away from something and that it's okay to do that and rethink it and come back to it? Those are life skills that unless you have them and value them, then when you get out into the workspace, you won't advocate for them. On the other hand, if you learn early on how important it is to have that space, then when you get a job, you do advocate for that. Like, I know I need this time and I will be a better employee. I'll be a more effective employee. I'll be a better coworker, but I know I need this time and I need to advocate for this time. Or I'm going to look for jobs where I know I'm going to have this. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm actually thinking about children who come from less than ideal circumstances, who you cannot disappoint your parents, you cannot fail. You have to educate, you have to get a good education, you have to get good marks, you have to get the grades that maybe allow you to get funding to go to university. And then, you're maybe still quite young, but you have to supplement the family income. Because whereas maybe you're starting out in your career and you could take care of yourself, you find yourself taking care of parents and siblings. And that kind of pressure, I think it's so prevalent. If I look around at a country like ours, where they're trying to make education more accessible and more available, but the pressure on you going through that, you were talking about kids who have relationships and so on with teachers who try to build that for them, and the life skills. Sometimes that's not enough, and I don't know what we can do about it. They have this class that they introduced after I left school, called life orientation. It's a thing that kids do these days. And having spoken to my niece and so on, it seems that it's basically a break for the kids. They don't get taught these life skills. They don't get taught. Sometimes you'll find a teacher who is still new to the job, who tries to teach them something, but it'll be something practical, if it's something at all. It's never about collaboration. It's never about, it's maybe study skills, but it's not collaboration. It's not living in the moment. It's not mindfulness. It's not any of those things that can help you to, and I'm not saying mindfulness is a panacea, but it's something that can just give you a moment to just ground yourself. And that's what I think that life orientation or life skills really should be about. It should be how to cope in this world. And that's not what they're getting taught. And, a lot of people say they wish they'd been taught to do their taxes. But which, fair enough, but those keep changing. I can figure out how to do my taxes, but what I didn't learn at school, and what took me a very long time to learn afterwards, is how to give myself a break, how to let myself off the hook sometimes, and how to just make sure that I was staying grounded, make sure that I wasn't trying to pour from an empty cup, because I did try to do that for a very long time.
But I think that's what I'm seeing in education in the US, is that there's definitely financial literacy courses being implemented on how to pay your taxes and manage credit. And there is an emphasis on how kind of that executive function and self-management and self-regulation, and what does collaboration look like, and how do you ground yourself, and how do you recognize when things aren't going the direction that you were hoping they were going to go. What do you do, and how do you approach those problems and those challenges, and who can help you or be a collaborator with you when you're experiencing that? those are important skills to be successful as an adult. And I think that nationally, there has been, in the US, a lot of time spent on, you can develop these skills while also learning academic skills. It's not an either or conversation. It's a both and conversation, that while you're learning your academic skills and your financial literacy skills, you can be practicing and applying these life skills that are going to help you kind of manage yourself moving forward and keep your cup full and find opportunities to be a good contributor to our society. I mean, ultimately, that's what you want. And there's some pushback on that from some parts of our world in the US, that they don't think that we should be spending time on those skills. And it's like, well, if we want children to grow up to be leaders and workers moving forward, then they have to learn now how to manage doing that in a successful way, in a happy way, so that they're not us watching Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous and hoping that someday we'll have a yacht and we can sit on the couch and watch television. It's necessary. And I think all people have the right to have happy and successful and fulfilling lives. And when I look at people in a community where they are day-to-day laborers, they are hourly minimum wage employees that don't get a lot of benefits, that don't get that time, that have repetitive jobs, that have physically demanding jobs. And like, if they had opportunities through their K-12 education to build those skills, then even within those job environments, would they have the tools in their toolbox to say, okay, this is where I am with my job, and I still can do these things in this space that I have. It's important to me to carve out something. I will carve out some space for me or for my family. You're talking about kids who need to be making, money. We've talked about this, Laura, that the education age in the United States is 18. You can't drop out of school until you're 18 on your own unless your parents sign off on that. And so it's a K-12 public education that we bus children to and feed children at, and provide safe spaces and books and equipment for them, which is very different than the educational experiences that some of the children in Cape Town are experiencing.
Our age is 15. And a lot of parents pull their kids out of school at 15 so that they can get some kind of day laborer, or, I mean, like a matric is not enough here. Like, I don't know about you, but there are very few jobs that you can get without at least high school education. And we've got these kids, and then at 15, they can maybe get some sort of menial job, but then at 25, they find themselves unemployed. And I don't think, like, I look at people I know, and some of them can't find one job and others are working 3. You should never have to have more than one job. And people wear that kind of thing as a badge of honor. We need to change the narrative. Working yourself to a standstill is not a badge of honor. It is a sign of a broken society, a broken system. And working long hours, it shouldn't be allowed. I'm very lucky in my company that they strongly discourage overtime work, but I have been in a job where it was expected to work 16-hour days, and I want to say it's not sustainable, accepting that the tragedy is that it kind of is. It is for a long enough time that when you actually have a breakdown, it is major, and you shouldn't ever have to have a breakdown from your job or from your jobs. It should be that, I mean, that is the So people talk about self-care, but then at the same time, and then they run a resilience workshop. I don't think then they move the complete responsibility onto you. So you're making me work a 16-hour day, but now you're taking an hour out of my 16-hour day to give me a resilience workshop. So it's my responsibility to somehow be resilient enough. And you shouldn't need resilience to just cope with everyday life. You shouldn't, like, life gets hard sometimes, right? But just having a job should not require resilience.
No, having the job should not require resilience. And I think when you're especially when you're a salaried employee and there aren't time bounds on you or law or rules about that, like, okay, well, you're done with your 8-hour day and now we have to pay you time and a half, or we're going to have to pay you double time. When you're a salaried employee, those safety nets don't exist. And I do think that that's where those time bleeds start to happen. And speaking as a school district administrator and having spent my last year as an educator in a K-12 setting as a superintendent, that's a 24/7 position. That job is a always job. Even when you're not in the office, it's an always job, and setting boundaries for, look, this is a Saturday and please do not text message me or send me emails because I'm not going to look at them on a Saturday unless there's some total crisis that has to occur. Like, please don't do that. And then respecting those boundaries and not sending emails and text messages to my administrative team on the weekend. Not just expecting a boundary for me, but helping set boundaries for them. Like, I'm not expecting you to respond to me on the weekends either, or at night after 9 o'clock, or, at 4 o'clock in the morning, but it's very difficult to maintain. I love that job, but there was a lot of trade-offs. I had really spent time intentionally focusing on finding time for myself, whether it was closing the door and putting a sign on it that says, I am not here. You do not see me. I am currently not in my office. Pretend like I am invisible, or telling my assistant there's a half an hour in my schedule because I need to go out and ride my bike and come back and then I'll be okay. Like, doing those things and having everybody around you be okay with the fact that I'm going to not be available for the next half hour is really difficult as a woman in leadership. And I know we've been talking a lot this morning, and that's one of our future topics is women in leadership, but like how people perceive you as a woman when you say, I need to take this break. I need a quick minute. I need to run home and check on something, or I need to step aside here and I'll be back in a half an hour. When you're a woman, there's a different level of perspective on that, because I think especially when you're in an upper management leadership position, you are expected to be going as the leader. But because you're a woman in leadership, you tend to be a compassionate leader. And so you have a lot of empathy. And so you spend a lot of time building relationships with people. So your cup needs to be full because you are, as a leader, constantly filling everybody else's cup. And I think that might be a topic for like our future conversation. Like, what does self-care look like? Not just because of privilege, but when you are a woman as a leader or a woman in a workplace environment, what is your self-care?
But I mean, that's also privilege, right?
Right.
So I mean, it's because then it's proof that you're emotional, unreliable, weak. Not to, and it's just, so again, privilege and self-care, because I know a man who I worked with, a friend who his our CEO contacted him at 9 o'clock on a Friday night, and he said, look, I've had a few drinks, I'll speak to you on Monday. And it was fine. And I tried to do a similar thing. I said, it's 9:30 on a Friday night. I'm not going to join a call now. And this was a weekly thing that I was expected to do. And I was told under no circumstances that was absolutely unacceptable. And under no circumstances was I going to get away with that. And I had to flatly refuse. And there were repercussions.
Right. I think it's hard to talk about that when you choose to prioritize self-care or space, that should be accepted, and there should not be repercussions. If you're still doing your job and you're still working within the framework that you're supposed to be working, then there shouldn't be repercussions for that. But there
refusing to work a 60-hour week should not have repercussions. You should not be in a position where you need to refuse. That is because,
or you're apologizing for it. I'm so sorry. I'm just not going to be able to make it to fill in the blank because I've already worked 75 hours this week and my husband has forgotten what I look like. So I'm sorry, I won't be able to do that. And then you feel badly about it because it's but I should be there. I should be there. And it's no, you can't always be everywhere. The trade-off is 10-minute dinners so that you can be there. It's important for people to see. Not only is it important for people to see that you're there, because that wasn't why I was doing it. It was because it was important to me, because that I cared about the kids and I wanted the kids to see me, to know that I was supporting them and to be there to celebrate their work. And it was so important to me that I was willing to make those trade-offs for my own self-care, that I knew that what I was giving up in eating a 10-minute dinner, sometimes a 5-minute dinner, or literally running across a parking lot once, holding my heels in my hand because I had to go from event A to event B and make it to event B. Nobody saw me running across the parking lot with my heels in my hands to make it there before the event started. They saw that I was there. And it was important for me to be there to celebrate with the kids. But then it was also important for me to say, yeah, this weekend, I'm not available. I'm banking some time for myself because I chose to pay attention in the moment to these things. But then I have to then set a boundary and say, in order for me to continue successfully being this and loving it, this weekend, I will not be available. Or this evening, I'm not available. Or I'm coming in late tomorrow morning. I'm sleeping in tomorrow morning and I will be here at 10. So be okay with that.
I feel like we've kind of settled now on the fact that a lack of self-care is actually a systemic issue. We have employers and responsibilities and things that discourage self-care. Our whole culture discourages it. Not only individual employers, our whole culture, this whole hustle culture we've got going discourages even the simple forms of self-care that we feel we could take.
So it's interesting. I think this is a good stopping point, because I think we can carry this into our next conversation. But the idea of healthcare and the conversations around healthcare need to include self-care. And I liked your idea of it being systematic. How can we, and maybe going back to the little things we can do within the systems that we are contributing to or a part of? What can we do within our own systems to continue to advocate for the importance of self-care time, and not just healthcare needs?
Sure, I feel like we could be talking about this for the next 3 days and not actually get to the end of it. This is such a big topic.
I think it is a big topic, and I'm going to make a note for ourselves, because I think it's a topic that it's worth processing and continuing to think about it. So I think it's a good fit for our podcast, because we know there's so much more to see than what we are sharing today, or experience in this case. And we'd love for you to show us what you see, or use our conversation today as an opportunity to share what you see with others. Know that we will be continuing this conversation because I think it's really important. Thanks for your reflection on it today, Laura.
Thank you, Char. It was really, really great to talk to you about this. And I look forward to reaching some kind of insight in the future as we continue with this conversation. And as hopefully we get input from the people who joined us today.
I agree. Thanks, Laura.
Bye, Char.